Alright friends, today we are going to generate a numerical pattern from ordered pairs on a coordinate grid. In our first example, we have this coordinate grid with these ordered pairs plotted on it. We also have this table, and we want to figure out the rule or pattern. Okay friends, we have a blank coordinate grid here, and the very first thing that I want you to do when you have a coordinate plane is to always label your key attributes. And so we know that our x-axis runs horizontally to the right. So this is our x-axis. This is our y-axis. This is our origin at 0, 0. And now we are going to take the time to label our coordinate pairs that are already plotted. The first coordinate pair that I want to label is this one right here. And if you remember, we always start at the origin and then we walk across the x-axis and jump on the y-axis. So this point here, walked 2 and jumped 4. So this one is 2, 4. And now we're going to label this one here. And in order to get there, we started at the origin, we walked 3, and we jumped 6. We're going to move on to the next one. To get there, we started at the origin, we walked 4 on our x-axis, and jumped 8. So we have 4, 8. And now let's label our last one. We start at the origin, we walked 5 and jumped 10. So we have 5, 10. Boys and girls, I want you to connect your coordinate pairs with a straight line that goes through your y-axis. So it'll look something like this. And you're going to see something is going to be very special about this line and these coordinate pairs, and I will show that towards the end of the video. Now that we have our coordinate grid labeled, we can go ahead and place the ordered pairs in the table. So here we have our table, and we remember that when we have an ordered pair, our first number is x, and our second number is our y. So if we have these ordered pairs here, we're going to put these ordered pairs from this coordinate plane into this table over here. So we're going to start with the bottom, because that's the one we labeled first. So x is first and y is second. So I'm going to place this in my table. The 2 goes in under the x, and the 4 goes in under the y. If we have the coordinate pair 3, 6, 3 is our x and 6 is our y. So 3 will go in for the x and 6 will go in for the y. If we have our coordinate pair 4, 8, we have x and y. So 4 will go in for x and 8 will go in for y. Our last one is 5, 10. So 5 will represent our x and 10 will represent our y. And we will put that in our table as 5, 10. So we went from our coordinate plane to our table, and now we can determine the pattern or rule using our table. So in order for us to look at our table and determine the rule, we have to figure out how did we get from x to y. And when we have coordinate grids and coordinate pairs, we either have an additive relationship or a multiplicative relationship. So that means we are going to either add something to x to get to y or multiply something by x to get to y. So let's look at our table. Our first x in our table is 2. 2, and our first y in our table is 4. So we want to know, how did we get from 2 to 4? And remember, we have to either add something or multiply. So I know that I can add 2 to get to 4. And if that's my rule for my first coordinate pair, that has to be my rule for all of my coordinate pairs. So let's check it. Our next one would be 3 plus 2. 3 plus 2 is not equal to 6. So this cannot be our pattern. We can say now, is there anything times 2 to get to 4? 2 times 2 equals 4. So if we are multiplying by 2, we need to make sure that every ordered pair is also multiplied by 2. So let's check the next one. 3 times 2 is equal to 6, so that works there. 4 times 2 is equal to 8, and that works there. 5 times 2 is equal to 10, and that works there. So our pattern or rule is y equals 2 times x. And that means every time we have an x value, we are going to multiply it by 2. So we took our x value of 2, multiplied it by 2, and got 4. Took our x value of 3, multiplied it by 2, and got 6. And for every x value we had, 2, 3, 4, and 5, we multiplied those by 2 and got our y. All right, boys and girls, now we're going to do these next examples. I'm going to do 4 of them with you and have you do the last 2 on your own. And you're going to take a picture of that and submit it into Schoology. But for our first one, we are going to solve this one together. And so if you remember, our first step will be to label our coordinate pairs. So I want to start by labeling from the bottom to the top. So we have a blank coordinate grid, and our first step is to label our key attributes. And so I'm going to start by labeling my x-axis. Then I'm going to label my y-axis. I'm going to label my origin. And remember that that is at the point 0, 0. And now I can begin to label my points. So my first coordinate pair is here. And I'm going to start at the origin. It looks like I walk 3 and I jump 5. So that one is 3, 5. My next one is here. I'm going to start at the origin. It looks like I'm going to walk 4 and then jump 6. My next coordinate pair is here. And this one looks like I walk 5 and jump 7. So my coordinate pair is 5, 7. And now my very last one is here. I'm going to start at the origin. It looks like I walk 6 and jump 8. So I have 6, 8. Now that I have all of my coordinate pairs labeled, I'm going to extend my line. Like this. And I'm going to now take my coordinate pairs and put them in a table. And so we know that our table needs to have an x and a y. I'm going to make a table. My first ordered pair is 3, 5. And we know when we have an ordered pair, x comes first, y comes second. So if you have 3, 5, 3 is your x and y is your 5. So 3, 5. Then we have 4, 6. So that's x and y. And that will go in our table like this. And now we have 5, 7. 5 is our x, 7 is our y. And we have 6, 8. So 6 is our x and 8 is our y. Put that in our table. And now we need to figure out how do we get from 3 to 5. And remember, we need to have additive or multiplicative pattern. So is there anything plus 3 that equals 5? Yes, that's 3 plus 2 equals 5. Okay, that worked for that one. So let's check the next pair. If plus 2 is your pattern for your first ordered pair, it has to be the pattern for the rest of the ordered pairs. So 4 plus 2 equals 6. That worked. 5 plus 2 equals 7. That works. 6 plus 2 equals 8. And that works as well. So we know that this is an additive pattern. And we can say that y equals x plus 2. So every time we have an x value, which is our 3, 4, 5, and 6, we are going to add 2 to it to get our y value, which is 5, 6, 7, and 8. So y equals x plus 2. All right, boys and girls, now we're going to work on the one directly underneath the one we just did. So I want you to take the time right now and label your coordinate plane. Now that you labeled your key attributes of your coordinate plane, we are going to label our coordinate pairs together. We're going to start right here with this coordinate pair. We start at the origin, we walked 1, and we jumped 3. So our coordinate pair is 1, 3. Our very next one is starting at the origin, and then it walks 2 and jumps 6. So we are at 2, 6. Moving on to the next one, we have start at the origin, walk 3, and jump 9. Now we are going to move our 3 points and put them into a table. If you remember, our table is x and y. And in a coordinate pair, x comes first and y comes second. So I'm going to take my coordinate pairs and place them into my table. We have 1, 3, 2, 6, and 3, 9. And now I need to figure out how I get from x to y. Remember, it has to be additive or multiplicative. So to get from 1 to 3, I can add 2. So let's see. 1 plus 2 equals 3. If it's adding 2 on the top one, it has to be adding 2 on all of them. Is 2 plus 2 6? Nope. So let's see if this is multiplicative. We have 1 to 3. So that would be 1 times 3 equals 3. 2 times 3 equals 6. And 3 times 3 equals 9. Those all work out. So that means our graph is a multiplicative graph. So that means that every time we have an x value, we multiply it by 3 to get to y. So y equals 3 times x. Now I want you to extend your graph just like this with a straight line. And we are going to move on to the very next problem, which will be the one next to the first one we did. And our first step is to label our key attributes. So go ahead and do that now. And we are going to label our coordinate pairs. So our very first one we have right here. And if you notice, we started at the origin. We didn't walk anywhere on the x-axis, so that stayed a 0. And then we jumped 3. Our next one here, we walked 1 and jumped 4. And then we walked 2 and jumped 5. Then we walked 3 and jumped 6. And now I'm going to take these ordered pairs, place them in a table, And if you remember our ordered pairs, the x goes first and the y goes second. So our first ordered pair is 0, 3. Then we have 1, 4. Then we have 2, 5. Then we have 3, 6. And now we need to figure out if this is multiplicative or additive. So how do I get from 0 to 3? I'm going to start with adding. So what plus 0 equals 3? 3. 0 plus 3 equals 3. If plus 3 is the rule for the first pair, it has to be the rule for all of the pairs. So 1 plus 3 equals 4. So I can keep going. 2 plus 3 equals 5. And 3 plus 3 does equal 6. So this is an additive graph, and we have y equals x plus 3. That means that every time we have an x value, we add 3 to that number to get our y. Now, boys and girls, I want you to extend your line through the graph like this. And we are going to move on to the one underneath it. Go ahead and take some time to label your key attributes. Now that we have done that, we can label our coordinate pairs. Starting with the very first one down here, that ordered pair down there is at our origin. And we know that our origin is 0, 0. We're going to move on to the next one. It looks like we walked 1 and jumped 2. For the next one, it looks like we walked 2 and jumped 4. The next one says that we walked 3 and jumped 6. And then we walked 4 and jumped 8. Now, boys and girls, we are going to make our coordinate pairs into a table. So x and y. Our first one is 0, 0. Then we have 1, 2. Then we have 3 and 6 and 4 and 8. All right, boys and girls. So now we are going to check and see if this is a multiplicative graph or if it is an additive graph. And so we have 0, 0. 0 plus 0 equals 0, and 0 times 0 equals 0. So I don't think that using 0, 0 to help us figure out the pattern is going to be very helpful. So just for a second, let's move on to the next one. We have 1 in our x and 2 in our y. How do I get from 1 to 2? I can add 1, so let's try adding 1. 1 plus 1 equals 2. 3 plus 1 does not equal 6, it equals 4. So this is not additive. Let's multiply. What times 1 equals 2? 2. So 1 times 2 equals 2. 3 times 2 equals 6. 4 times 2 equals 8. And we can go back to the top, and we know that anything times 0 equals 0. So 0 times 2 equals 0. And that is telling me that we have a multiplicative graph. And for every x value, we multiply it by 2 to get y. So y equals 2 times x. All right, boys and girls, I want you to go ahead and extend your line through your graph like this. And we are done with our examples together. But before you move on to the last two to do by yourself, I want to show you something. So if you notice, our top two examples are both additive graphs, right? So that means that we added something to x to get to y. And if you look at the bottom ones, these are both multiplicative. graphs. That means we multiplied a number by x to get to y. If you look at our graphs, is there anything that the top two and the bottom two have in common? Think about it for a second, and I'm going to show you something that will really be helpful for you. So if you notice, our multiplicative graphs, the ones on the bottom, when we extended them, they all go through the origin. Do you see that down there? Our additive graphs do not go through the origin, and instead they go through a number on the y-axis. If you look at our example up here at the top, we had a multiplicative graph, right? And this one also went through the origin. So I want you to keep that in mind as you continue to do these problems. As you do the last two examples on your own, notice where the line goes through and tell me if you would think that it's an additive graph or a multiplicative graph. All right, friends, go ahead and finish the last two examples on your own. And when you are done with those, make sure you take a picture of them and submit your 3 to 4 sentences.